Okay, so I was searching around on YouTube, and I searched the phrase uh, antinatalism, non-existence, and I came across this quote from David Benatar where he addresses Bernard Williams' uh, claims about immortality. So I'll go ahead and read this. Bernard Williams claims that two conditions would need to be met in order for immortality to be good for me. First, it must be I who lives forever. Second, the state in which I survive would have to be one that is attractive to me. He argues that the second condition would not be met in an immortal life because one would inevitably become bored by endless repetition of the same experiences. He recognizes that one way to avoid this problem would be survival by means of infinite series of lives. However, that possibility violates the first conditions. He says the future selves would have to be sufficiently different from me not to get bored by the experiences that would have come to bore me. However, any future selves that were so different would no longer be I. So, first, I want to explain what the I is. So, every single brain, human brain at least, that's alive and functioning here on Earth is what is doing what we refer to as an I or a self. So you refer to yourself as I, and everyone refers to themselves as I. And you can refer to everyone else as you. So, what are we talking about? What are we referring to when we say I? We're referring to the uh, the center of experience that we feel that there is a center of experience located in our cranium, in our brain. Um, it's the I is we use our names to refer to I, like I am Ted, or I am William, or I am David, or I am, uh, Shelley, or I am, you know, this is what we mean by I. Sam Harris points out that such an I doesn't actually really exist, but there is a sensation that we are all a self, but there is no actual like we can't look in the brain and pinpoint the I. It is more like a function of the brain. We could even say that the I itself is consciousness or conscious experience. Um, because the I is a sensation that is directly related with conscious experience. We experience being a self, an I, even if we can't locate that self within the brain. Um, so, this is what David Benatar is referring to when he says I. So, after the I that's watching this video dies, um, so you didn't exist, but then a human material body was born, and that brain within that body started eventually uh, doing what we refer to as an I or a self. And eventually, when that body, when that body decomposes and dies, that particular I, the one reading this right, or listening to me talk right now, will cease to be done by that brain. And I say brains do consciousness, or they do eyes and whatnot, because we say consciousness is a function of the brain. So you could say brains do consciousness. Just like we can say that legs walk, you know. The legs are doing the walking. So I hope that explains what is meant by I. So like, just imagine you don't even have a name. You were born and you just don't even have a name. Yet you would still have the sensation of being a center of awareness here in the universe, a individual body, an individual conscious experience or consciousness. So if you never had a name, you'd still have the I sensation, that there would still be an I. Again, everyone refers to themselves as I. So each brain, you can just imagine, like, just shut your eyes and imagine like thousands of brains, and each of those brains is doing an individual I. They're all doing an I. Anyways, so I needed to convey that before I move on. So this was my response in the video, which I found this quote. And I'm pointing out, so Benatar at the very end here says, however, any future selves that were so different would no longer be I. So he says future selves. So he's referring to future I's. Self and I in philosophy are the same thing, really. So I say, pardon my, I misspelled a few things in here. I wasn't paying attention. And so yeah, like future selves wouldn't be, that's supposed to be B instead of I. Anyways, future selves wouldn't be the current I, but they would be the I at that point in time, nevertheless. And so such a thing would render Benatar's antinatalism futile, as he says, all lives are bad. So if yet more life comes after death, after this life, then there would be no escape from conscious experience. So if yet more life comes after death, then there was no escape from conscious experience. And this nullifies Benatar's goal. Another way of looking at it is to imagine that after you die, it's just another life of being yet another different antinatalist. A completely different I, but one that also wishes she were never born. So then eventually she dies, but then once again another antinatalist I follows, and this just keeps happening. Each I wishes it were never born. But even if an I eventually came along that's happy to live, in Benatar's opinion, they too would have been better off to never came to exist. So I ask you, did an I come after the last time you didn't exist? Yes, the I that's reading this right now. And what are the processes that brought this I to exist? Answer, the process of procreation, and then the eventual birth of said I. So now, here's another question. Will babies be born after the I that's reading this dies? Yes, babies of all sorts will come to exist via procreation, birth. So, yes, there will be I's after this I ends. Non existence will once again be followed by yet another life, another I experience. And that I will not have any recollection of the previous I's lives or memories, and so on. This is what philosopher Tom Clark calls generic subjective continuity. As Clark says, consciousness is always present for itself, or as I put it, only experiences what's experienced. So instead of imagining like there being a perpetual, endless uh, sort of a emptiness after death, or a continual, unending lack of experience after death, uh, after the brain that's reading this dies and decomposes, yes, that consciousness has ceased. But we recognize that, as the quote says, life goes on. And so other brains will be doing I's. And so just as your non existence was followed by a life, your life, so non existence is always followed by an I. And this is true for everyone we know. That everyone we know didn't exist, but then that non existence was followed by I, an I, a life. And so just imagine you died and you completely ceased to exist. But imagine that all living things in the universe died, all sentient, conscious beings in the universe died. And then a few years later, a million years later, whenever, however long, via natural processes, whatever, eventually, somewhere in the universe, a conscious, sentient organism somehow comes to exist. And so now that is the only experience. That's the only I there is. So instead of there being a silent black void after everyone died, or like a persistent non-experience or lack of experience, there is indeed experience actually occurring after they died. It's not a continuation of them, but yes, their death would be followed by yet another conscious experience of being of the life of being some other conscious being. It wouldn't be them being that conscious being. It wouldn't be them inside of that conscious being, not reincarnation. It would just be that, yes, experience is being done by some other brain. Just as your non-existence was followed by a life, so too would non-existence also be followed by life. The second non-existence after death would also be followed by life, as long as new lives come to exist after you die. But just as for all the billions of years you didn't exist, from your point of view, all that was skipped over. Just like, whenever you're under with anesthesia, the period of time that you're under, you don't experience that period of time. From your point of view, it's skipped over. It's almost like you could say unconsciousness is a proverbial time machine. And the same is true with any lack of consciousness in the universe. That period of time, no matter how long it is from the perspective of whichever consciousness eventually arises. When that consciousness arises, it's as if it just doesn't recall what happened before it, what was going on before it. From its point of view, it's all skipped over, and bam, there it is, just like waking up from anesthesia. It just starts all over. Only this time, it's a completely new consciousness, so it doesn't have any previous memories or anything like that. Um, so yeah, and you might say that, well, the heat death of the universe and all that, but even that wouldn't be experienced as any sort of uh, uh, rest from experience, or as Tom Clark puts it, a respite. There would be no like peaceful oblivion. There would be no like appreciation of our non-existence. Eventually, after the heat death of this universe, at some point in time, it may take infinity times infinity times infinity, however long it takes. Eventually, consciousness is going to occur again, because change is inevitable. Eventually, there will, you just can't have uh, nothing forever. Now, this is my claim that eventually another universe is going to happen, but there are other uh, renowned scientists that agree that eventually it'll all start over. Um, Probably the same processes that started this universe would start another one. Or maybe there's multiverses, in which case our universe would end, but some other universe somewhere else may be in the middle of existence while ours has ended, or other ones are starting and other ones are ending, and so on and so forth. Um, Either way, only experience is experienced. And so all non-experiences are always skipped over. And Benatar's wish is for there to be, as I pointed out here, his wish is for there to be no experience, a persisting, like I said, like a persisting nothingness, or eternal oblivion, or peaceful oblivion type of deal, just like a black void. And I say that he isn't aware that this is what his whole asymmetry argument is based on a fallacy. It's illogical. But he just writes off Bernard Williams here and says, it wouldn't be me, so it's like, that doesn't matter. Yeah, but it would be yet another life after this one. And like I said, what if that life is of yet another antinatalist, which Benatar hopes to convert everyone to be an antinatalist. That's why he wrote the book. I mean, that would be the ideal situation for him, just as he says the ideal situation for him would be complete and utter extinction of all life in the universe. So for Benatar, no life is worth living. You point to anyone on the street, he said that one, if it were up to him, that no matter who you point to, good life, bad life, whatever, to him, none of them, all of them would have been better off not coming to exist. He'd be like, nope, you point to anyone, he said, nope, that won't do, nope, that won't do, no matter who it is. And so we can just summarize it all, or generalize it all, by saying, okay, Benatar just is against conscious experience, period. Because, as he says, eventually there is going to be a period of suffering, even if that suffering is so minute, even if it is like the inconvenience of using the bathroom, or the inconvenience of having to do dishes, or the inconvenience of requiring food, or just any slight, which he's right, all life eventually includes suffering, no matter how little that suffering is. So he's right about that. But yeah, there's just like, it is a fact that only experience is experienced. Or you could say consciousness is always present for itself. This is a fact. And so generic subjective continuity is a fact. Now, we might, perhaps there is an afterlife, perhaps heaven is real, perhaps, it's nirvana, whatever. I mean, but either way, no matter what, after death, life will, in fact, be followed by some experience or another. Now, if you die and go to hell, and the whole annihilationism thing is true, then after you annihilate, then there we go. That leads us back to generic subjective continuity. And so that annihilation would be followed by some other conscious experience being done by some other brain. There's just no escape from experience. And even at the heat death of the universe, that wouldn't be any sort of like, phew, I'm glad that's all over with. No more experience. Yay. No, it wouldn't be experienced. And we can't even imagine that. But eventually, as I say, it may take so long that an incomprehensible amount of time, but eventually there would come a time where some sort of conscious experience started to occur again. Just as it took basically forever for conscious experience to come onto the scene here on Earth, Eventually, it's like, given enough time, things happen. So anyways, yeah, he did sort of, in a way, unknowingly address the generic subjective continuity problem, but he failed to fully recognize what it meant for his asymmetry argument. But anyways, this video is getting quite long, so thanks for watching.